Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio. And we're thrilled to once again be joined by Bridget Todd, the wonderful, the marvelous, the magnificent, yes. And the very busy. We have missed you, Bridget.
Yes.
I have missed you all too. My favorite authors. It's nice to be in the company of some literary ladies.
Oh, that's what they call us. The
I was going to say,
ladies.
That sounded like a foreign language. I was like, who are you talking about?
Like, oh, is there a writer here?
Where?
You just bring on guests.
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm here with Roxanne Gay.
Behind you.
Yes. Do you enjoy writing, Bridget?
I used to enjoy it. I was the kind of person who would labor over every sentence, every word choice. And so writing a paragraph would take me forever. It's one of the reasons why I'm a podcaster, because I feel it's so much easier to say it verbally. Once I started podcasting, I was like, writing who? I don't know her. Just say it with words. Just say it verbally. But I used to enjoy it. Like I used to like send pitches to freelance editors and stuff. And but yeah, much less lately. How about you? What is your relationship to writing, the both of you, now that you're going to be published authors?
I love it. We've talked about on the show. Samantha and I have both done NaNoWriMo, which I know makes a lot of editors roll their eyes, but done that. And I have recently, during the pandemic, written a ton of fan fiction, like an actual shocking amount, perhaps, which I've started publishing to, I'll say, rave reviews.
It's true. She has fan art.
I do. People made art about it.
People like it.
Yes, people like it. So I do love it. It is something I enjoy. But I guess one of the things about NaNoWriMo and fan fiction to a lesser extent is I was kind of like you, Bridget, with the editing, and I would get some in my head and like, this isn't perfect. But NaNoWriMo is like, I don't care, get it done. It has to happen. And then you go back and maybe you get stuck in the editing again. But it was a real nice, for me, thing to do, of getting out of my head and just writing it. And now we're reading some of that stuff on Sminty. And then with fan fiction, it's nice because it's like literally, people like use this as an argument against it. And I'm like, no, this is an argument for it. Like, it's a hobby and it's fun. Like, I'm not worried about like it. People will enjoy it. I like it. It's not going to go anywhere, and that's fine. But I just like doing it, and I like writing, and it's definitely kind of therapeutic for me.
Right. I don't do a lot of writing anymore. My form of writing has always been fiction, but I'm also one of those who, it's the mood. The way my mood fluctuates is how it goes. And the more depressive I am, the more likely I'm going to write. And the more depressive and likely I'm going to write, it's going to be sad. So I try to stay away from that because I'm more fictional than anything else. I think for the most part, doing this type of work was a whole different beast. Doing things like when we write scripts and outlines and researching has been such a whole different beast that it's kind of the only way I do it now. I just kind of just space out. I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I'm not touching a pencil, pen, or the typewriter or a keyboard typewriter. I'm that old. That's how long it's been, y'all.
The quill pen.
Look, I love typewriters. I love them so much. I wish I could have like several, because I would collect them, kind of like Tom Hanks does, if I had the money.
I had one in college. I thought I was so hip. I didn't use it. It was just to like have and make me feel cool. Annie, to your point about being able to have outlets to write where you're not so in your head about it, like that's something that I think is really important about like having a craft that you're honing. I have a Post-it note on my laptop that I'm looking at right now that says "Do it." Because it's like, for me, so often the need to do something perfect or to produce something really good just keeps me from doing anything. And so I think that we need to have outlets where the point is doing it. The point is like, actually putting pen to paper or finger to keyboard and not really being in your head and worrying about like, is it perfect? And so I think like times like the National Novel Writing Month, having things like that, like that kind of get you in the practice of just focus on writing, execute, just write, don't worry about it, edit it later, can be really, really powerful.
Right. They have a script writing month too for people who do scripts.
They do.
Speaking of which, Anney has also other works that are not necessarily published, but they have been out because she's done it with the 12 Days of Halloween, all of that. So she's got work out there. She is acting like she's not known, but she definitely has credit.
I was just waiting for you to say.
I know. You need someone else to blow your horn. I got you, boo.
Isn't that so funny how like it's so much easier to like hype up a friend than it is to hype up your own work? What's that about?
Yeah. Oh my God. It just feels, and I think this is a lot of like conditioning we have. It just feels like you're, as a woman, like, oh, I'm drawing too much attention to myself, or oh, like, what if it's not that good?
Right.
Like,
the doubt of like, it's that good anyway, so you don't want to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And no one wants to seem like a bragger, but you should be bragging. We should all be bragging. My friend Meredith Feynman wrote a book called Brag Better. That's all about the importance of women bragging. Brag on yourself, everyone. Anney, Sam, and listeners.
And listeners, yes.
Yes. Well, speaking of, I know you've been up to a lot of stuff, Bridget. Do you want to give us any highlights of what's happened since we last talked?
Well, we have relaunched season 4 of my podcast, There Are No Girls on the Internet. We launched it, I think, last week. Is that right? So it's been one of those, speaking of like, doing it crappy and just like getting it out. It was, I don't know. I mean, I've been doing this podcast for years now, but like got a little bit in my head and was like paralyzed with an inability to just like do the thing. Had some stuff to work through there, but it got done and people can listen to it and it's ongoing now. You can check it out. So that was really exciting. We wrapped another podcast with Next Chapter podcast called Beef, all about historical beefs and rivalries, which is a kind of side interest of mine. You can listen to all 8 episodes. It was super fun to make. My favorite was probably Ann Landers and Dear Abby. Did you know they were sisters? I didn't know that. Yeah, they were like sisters who had this intense rivalry because they were both advice columnists. Fascinating stuff. Definitely check it out. Exciting times.
That's interesting. I wonder what like family events were, because those were the times that you sit together and kind of mull over whatever troubles you may have, boyfriend troubles, and the both of them trying to give you advice. How annoying would that be?
I know. Can you imagine?
That's where you went.
In my head, I'd be like, okay, one was bad enough, but both of you have to put in your 2 cents and sound like your therapist. That's even worse.
God, Christmas dinners were a lot in that family.
Jeez. Was their advice like similar?
No, that was something that they had very distinctive advice styles. One of them, her advice was like much more kind of like traditional. Another's was like her advice was much more like progressive. They had different attitudes. Like they accepted things like, like gay rights and like having people like gay couples come in with advice. They accepted those things on very different timelines. Like they had very different styles of advice. It is fascinating. People should like if you were interested, that's the episode. I feel they're all pretty good, but that's the one that I feel like is like I learned the most about advice. I'll say one more thing. This is like I'm going on way too long, but I am fascinated by it. Advice columns were kind of predated this like internet era idea of people publishing things and then the readers being able to write in. Before the days of the internet, in print, the only place where people would publish something and then the readers would then submit letters being like, oh, I don't know about that, or submit letters at all, getting advice, was advice columns. And so the whole concept of a readership being in conversation and in dialogue with a print publisher that is now like part of the internet really got its start in advice columns. So, fun fact. I know that's random.
So, were you team
awesome.
Abby or team, is it Anney? Is that what you said?
Ann Landers. What a good question.
Oh my gosh.
I identify with...
If there's a beef, there's a team.
Yeah, if there's a beef, there's a team, exactly.
Yeah.
At times, I identify with both. I think that at Dear Abby, definitely struck me as the pettier of the two. And so I definitely saw a lot of myself in that. But at times I see myself in both of them. We'll put it that way.
Okay.
Oh, that's great.
Good to know.
Yes. Oh, I need to check that out.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, my Google updates all the time to this day, like gives me these kinds of questions people are apparently still asking to advice columnists. And that when I read them, I'm like, this is wild. This is a thing that is happening.
My God. I read advice columns. It's like one of my favorite things. I read advice columns every day. It's funny because I was just talking to someone about an advice column I read yesterday. I think it was in Slate, where a woman had set her single coworker up with a friend of hers, and they went on a date at a bar, and the coworker was like, well, we can't go out again. And she was like, why? And it was because her friend at the bar ordered a glass of plain milk. And he was like, I can't see her again. And so the letter writer was like, how can I convince him that he's being ridiculous? And like, let her order whatever she wants. She's a catch. The weird, petty stuff that people write into advice columns, I'm endlessly fascinated by it.
Yeah.
I feel like the update to that is the am I the asshole Reddit stuff,
yes.
which I adore, obviously.
Yes.
Oh, I love them. And like, there are podcasts where people just read them.
Yes.
I'm addicted.
That's the entire podcast is they just read it and then they talk about it. I'm like, wow, that's simple. Can we do that?
Yeah. No, like 6-page research doc.
No. I don't need 12 pages of things and reading horrible things. Thank you.
Yeah, but it also just underscores like how people are doing all kinds of things that I'm shocked by all the time.
Yeah, it's so true. And like reading advice columns and all of the, like, am I like, humans are fascinating. We have fascinating motivations. Our behavior is really fascinating. Like, the ability for humans and our behavior and our range of behaviors will never cease to surprise me. I'll put it that way, both in negative ways and positive ways.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. Well, I guess kind of like segueing into technology and how it's changed how things are happening and how we operate. The topic you brought today is so important, and I know it's a question that a lot of people have. So what are we talking about today?
So this is an important topic. You know, it's been almost a year since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. And after that happened, probably immediately one of the biggest issues that came up was this connection between technology and abortion access. You know, like, should I delete my period tracker app? Like, what? Like, can I Google abortion? Am I going to go to jail? And so, namely, this idea that all of the data from our smartphones could and would be used to prosecute abortions. So, you know, back in the day, in the days before Roe in 1973, you know, it was a rough landscape for abortion access, obviously. We've made some really good progress, you know, because of the expansion of things like pill-based abortion and, you know, the ability to get pills by mail. But in the days before Roe in the 70s, we all didn't carry like GPS devices in our pocket or have this vast virtual network of mass surveillance that could help criminalize people who need abortions in the communities that help them. And I'm sorry to say that Google, the thing that most of us use for our email, for our maps, for our cell phones, for some of us, if you use an Android or a Google phone, is a huge part of that network. And so today I want to talk about some of the ways that Google has been collecting data related to abortions, what Google has publicly said, what they're actually doing, and some recent movement and news in that arena.
You know, I haven't really been thinking about it because we've talked about, again, like as you were talking about the period tracker and then Facebook, because we already know some of the headlines that it's made in what they've done and how they have helped the anti-abortion movement so much in the whole right-winged conversation. But I really haven't thought about Google, even though I should be. Like, obviously, we know Google mines a lot of data and there's still conversation about how much information they keep and they spread. But I haven't really thought of it on like par with what's going on with abortion. So can you kind of explain what we're talking about here?
Totally. So I think what you just said, Sam, I've noticed the same thing. I think that when it comes to a lot of online harms, people think of Facebook, people think of Twitter, of course. Google is an interesting case. I do think that anecdotally, Google has been able to skirt a lot of public scrutiny about the way that they handle some of this stuff in a way that other platforms have not been able to skirt that kind of scrutiny. I think a lot about this. I think it's because Google offers a useful product for the world, right? Like Google does make platforms and tools that are helpful to us. Facebook, I feel like, is different in that like all they really offer is like Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram. Some of those are, globally, some of those platforms are like really useful. But here in the United States, I feel like if Facebook disappeared, the tool that they offer is not really as much of a global good as Google. And so I think that for that reason, I think that maybe that's why Google doesn't come to mind when you think about these kind of harms. But the reality is that Google is really a major player when it comes to the way that our data can be misused specifically to criminalize abortions. And so shortly after Roe was overturned by the Supreme Court almost a year ago, Google said that it would proactively delete its location data when people visited, quote, particularly personal places, including abortion clinics, hospitals, and shelters. Their statement said, "Today we're announcing that if our systems identify that someone has visited one of these places, we will delete these entries from location history soon after they visit. This change will take effect in the coming weeks." And so it's really that last part of their statement that is important. Like, what does the word soon mean? Like, my definition of soon and Google's definition of soon might be two different things. What does will take effect in the coming weeks? It's been almost a year. Like, is that, I mean, technically that is a matter of weeks. So like, is that what Google is defining as a couple of weeks? Wouldn't be how I define it. And so this was something that Google publicly agreed to do. They will tell you that they just like decided to do this as a public good on their own. That's not exactly true. There definitely were like digital rights groups behind the scenes pressuring them to make this choice. But in any event, they did, and they enjoyed a lot of positive, glowing press, for doing this. However, it's been almost a year and Google has not really followed up in any kind of meaningful or consistent way in their promise to delete this location history if they think that someone is going to an abortion clinic. And that is really concerning because we do live in a landscape where abortion is so easily criminalized and your digital footprint can be used to create evidence that you have tried to illegally access information about abortion.
Right. And the thing is, like, a lot of times you're using like maps or GPS to get to any place, like to get to an abortion clinic. And I will say about Google, like, there are a lot of things that you don't realize it's tracking, even if, because I'm somebody who's like, I go in and I turn off, like, you're not listening to my voice, you're not doing this, you're not doing this. It's still doing it. Like, I can't figure out how, but it is. And once I found a map of like everywhere I'd been, even though I don't really use GPS that much. And I think it's because of like emails I get. It's like, oh, you're going on this trip, or oh, you're doing this thing. I'm trying to figure it out, but I can't. But it was creepy. Like, you can go and find a map of everywhere you've been, and it is frightening when it can be used in this very scary landscape in a case where against abortion or something, in a case of abortion. So it's not like, sometimes when you talk about stuff like this, it can feel very, as we've said several times on this show when you've been on, like, oh, that's an internet thing, I don't see it, so it's not real. But it very much is. And there is data around this whole thing, right?
Totally. So this is not an internet issue. This is not an abstract issue or a hypothetical far away down the line, maybe one day issue. This is an issue that is happening to people in their real lives right now. So just to set the scene, according to Google's own transparency report, they have already been subpoenaed several times for user data. In the second half of 2021, they received 18,037 subpoenas and 23,924 search warrants for user information. So it's pretty reasonable to conclude that prosecutors in states where abortion is illegal might already be making requests for personal data from Google to prosecute those looking for abortions. Also, in terms of like where we've already seen this happening, we already know that people have already been charged with obtaining abortions or helping somebody obtain an abortion with their digital footprint being used as evidence. You might remember that when Roe was overturned, Mark Zuckerberg, when he was asked about it, he said that he was hoping that encrypting Facebook's messages would help protect people from, quote, overbroad requests for information. But that did not stop the company from handing over user information. In June, before Roe was overturned, Facebook turned over the private messages of a mother and daughter facing criminal charges for allegedly carrying out an illegal abortion. And so this is happening now. It is not abstract. People are currently embroiled and in legal situations where they're facing jail time because tech companies were gave over sensitive information that they had from folks who were allegedly looking up information about abortion or talking about abortion. And so the reason why we have some insight into this is because of a new report from the digital rights organization Accountable Tech. They did a couple of different experiments to get a sense of how Google is tracking and whether or not they're actually deleting this location information. And they're just not. So they said that they were going to, and they are not. Like, there's not any other way to interpret kind of what's going on here.
You know, and as y'all are talking about it, I just realized I get monthly information about where you went this month, like as if this is like, hey, let's do a monthly review. Look at you traveled these places, as if to celebrate. And now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, wait, what if I don't want to remember where I went the last month? What is happening? And I don't remember ever saying, yes, I want this information. Yes, I want it to be recorded. And yes, I want it to be given back to me. So if they have that so easily given without me even prompting or asking for it, I can't imagine what they actually have. And honestly, I can't imagine how they decide what to delete if they're doing specific locations, like how that would even come up, as well as the fact that, yeah, if they have pinpointed specific locations, that would be easily trackable and easily used against someone, right?
Totally. And Sam, your point is such a good one. And I think it's a good, it provides a good zoomed out understanding of the issue, right? Because I get those too. I've talked about this on my own show about the Spotify Wrapped, which I always enjoy getting, but all of these ways that we have been conditioned to believe that surveillance is a good thing. Like, oh, I want to get a summary of all the different places I've traveled in the last month. And it's, all these pictures of where I was set to music. That might feel exciting to get, and I'm certainly susceptible to being excited to information about how I've lived my life. But that is digital surveillance. And the way that we have been conditioned to think it is not just commonplace to have our devices and our platforms tracked and surveilled by big tech companies and used for profit by those companies, but that we should be happy that it's actually cool and fun to see this information about ourselves and get these little, summaries of what we listened to, where we went, what things we bought, what we ate, all of that. There really needs to be a fundamental reassessment of the relationship between users and tech companies when it comes to our data, because we deserve privacy. Privacy should be the standard. But even if you dress it up with a little montage or a little newsletter or whatever, that is still surveillance. And we should ultimately be questioning whether that fundamental relationship between user and platform. That's my soapbox about surveillance. I get upset about it because it gets me too. I even though I know all of this stuff and I feel very strongly about it, when I get a pretty, breakdown of what I listen to at the end of the year, I like it. And so it's so insidious how we've been trained to like things that ultimately may not be good for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking about this the other day because when I was in third grade, I wrote this. We were supposed to tell a story, and I wrote this story called The Right to Be Forgotten. I was like, what was going on with me? But
great title.
Yeah.
I know, but
That's
now
such
it's
a
an
great
actual
title.
thing. It became a case against Google where people were like, I don't want to be remembered in certain ways where you can search me on the internet. And it was a case with the EU. And so I revisited it a couple of years ago as an actor, and I did The Right to Be Forgotten. And people afterwards were like, what are you talking about? But kind of that idea of maybe I just don't want people to know. There are certain parts I just want to be private.
Oh my God.
I don't want to share. I'm a time traveler, everybody.
It is wild that you're saying this. Literally yesterday, I did an interview with a UCLA internet researcher named Olivia Snow. And we were talking, we were explicitly talking about the right to be forgotten when it comes to platforms. I cannot believe that this is a concept that you have been, grappling with since you were a child.
She does this a lot. There are things that pop up. Like she's like, "That was my idea." And I was like, "What?"
It's just me trying to take
like when I was 10 years old.
When I was 9, I was doing that. Was like the year I wrote out like all the like top things I wanted to do before I died. Like I don't know what was going on.
What's going on?
Anyway,
She has a lot of trauma. It's okay.
Yeah, well. Going back to that study you mentioned, the accountable tech thing, they did run a couple of specific experiments, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm going to kind of gloss over it, but folks should definitely check out the study. You can find it online. But essentially, they did, I think, 3 different experiments where they had a staffer buy an unused, totally new Android smartphone and then start a new test Google account. And they accepted all the default privacy settings. And they had this staffer travel from one state to another to different abortion providers. So in one, I think they traveled from Columbus, Ohio to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and wound up at like Planned Parenthood of Pittsburgh, and to see, later how that data would be handled. In one test, the staffer, when they logged into the test account that they made on her browser, so like she took the phone to the clinic, and then when she logged on the browser, I think 30 days later, under the web and app activity tab, after she completed this test, she found a Google Maps search query from the abortion provider that she visited stored on her account. So like, they're just not deleting the data. Like, it's just like there's no other way to interpret that information. And they did these tests in 3 different ways. And each time there was some information continued to be stored on those Google accounts. And so according to Accountable Tech, by retaining both location search query and location history data, Google jeopardizes the health, safety, and legal status of the users who visit reproductive care facilities in states where abortion is criminalized. If prosecutors in a state with a restrictive abortion law receive a tip about someone seeking an abortion, a subpoena would likely force Google to hand over this sensitive data. And again, just to underscore that, Google said that they were going to delete this data soon after a person visited what they said was one of these sensitive sites, including abortion providers. And so this test that Accountable Tech ran, 30 days is like, how was Google defining soon in this situation, right? Like, I would argue that a month is enough time to have deleted this, but perhaps Google disagrees. And so it does really feel like this is a situation where they're, I mean, I'm no lawyer, but misleading the public, saying publicly they're doing one thing and then doing another thing in actuality that could get people in serious legal trouble,
Right. And that's the thing is like, I know we're going to talk about this later, but if a company is telling me a thing, I think a lot of people use the word, like they call me naive, which I don't think is fair. But like, if I'm like, oh, I trust that because that's what they said, and then it could be used in a criminal case despite what they said, like that feels both wrong, illegal, but also it's very scary. Like that is a very frightening scenario.
Exactly. And I think it really underscores how scary and dire and complicated things can be for someone who is pregnant, right? Like it can already be a scary, intense time, but adding on to this vibe of you can't trust what these companies who say they are going to do X to keep you safe a little bit more, you can't trust what they're saying. It just adds to this complex web where it's difficult to know who you can trust. And so I should note that today, according to the Washington Post, most criminal charges for abortion stem from a human telling the authorities, not just from your digital footprint being scraped by Google or something like that. But we know that your digital footprint can be used as evidence. And so, we live in this climate where vindictive ex-lovers, nosy neighbors, or even just self-appointed vigilantes who may have no connection to someone who is pregnant at all of these people can be threats. In Texas, a man filed a wrongful death lawsuit against 3 women for allegedly helping his then wife obtain pills that allegedly were used to induce an abortion last year. If you're someone who is looking for an abortion in a state where it's been criminalized, not only do you need to think about who you can trust, who has access to this information about you, who's in your community, again, like even just like your nosy neighbor next door who doesn't like you for no reason, But also on top of that, you need to think about your digital security. You need to think about how you are accessing information and data online. And you need to think about whether or not Google is being upfront about what they're publicly saying about how they use that data. It is an incredibly high burden that nobody should have to deal with. It's already hard enough to be in this situation. On top of it, you should not, as a regular person, have to be parsing lies from a platform like Google to make choices for your life and for your health.
I know that you came on and talked about it, I think pretty soon after Roe versus Wade got overturned, but kind of the like unfortunate tips that people need to know about, like, you know, different, as I was saying, Gmail being used, but like having a separate Gmail account and using a private browser and all these things that, like, it's like you were saying, it's a lot to ask of someone to know that they need to do that stuff.
Yeah, we shouldn't be asking this of people. Like, you shouldn't have to be a digital security expert just to make choices for your health. You shouldn't have to know how to parse a corporation's public PR speak from what they're actually doing. Like, that is a lot for someone to have to navigate. And so right after Roe was overturned, we did an episode of There Are No Girls on the Internet with a computer scientist and digital security expert, Dr. Jen Golbeck. If you know that name, maybe you've seen her popular TikTok series educating people on how to be more secure when navigating abortion information online. I should say, like, I am not a lawyer. I am not a digital security expert. So I want to be clear about that. But I wanted to just, if it's possible, play a little clip of what she told me, because she is the expert. I don't want to, like, summarize what she said. So, you know, you've mentioned a couple of, like, really great tips for folks if you're you know, looking for abortion pills and you want to do it, you know, in a way that you're going to be less likely to be tracked, you know, using a Tor browser, using incognito mode when you search, using public Wi-Fi. Are there other tips that you want to shout out for folks if they might need this information?
So that's all important stuff. I would say for sure the most important one is that you are not paying with a credit card or a debit card connected to your name. So figure out how much your medication is going to cost. Use cash, buy like a Visa Vanilla gift card, which you can get anywhere for that amount, and then pay with the Visa Vanilla gift card. So much of how we're tracked is through credit card number. So definitely do that. And the other way that we're really easily tracked is through email address. So set up a fresh email address that you are only using to buy this abortion medication. Proton Mail is the one site that I recommended for this. It's free, it's encrypted, it's really good and secure. You can just set up an email address, use it to buy your medicine, don't use it for anything else. If you do that, gift card, fresh email address on something like Proton Mail, you know, I love Gmail. I use it, right? But they track the hell out of you on Gmail. So Proton Mail email address, vanilla gift card, you get 80% of the protection from tracking just from those two measures. So, you know, that's easy and accessible to anybody. Definitely do that.
So, yeah, she doesn't speak to map location data. And I think that's an interesting point, that when we were having conversations about how to stay secure, it was really like searching things, paying for things. But I guess it stands to reason that in 2023, you might be using Google Maps to access just like, where am I going? If I need to go get an abortion, like, where am I headed? And it kind of reminds me of like the throwback idea, how before the ubiquity of things like GPS, you had to just know where you were going. And there are places that I've been multiple times in my life. I could get there through muscle memory. Now with GPS, I'm like, oh, how do I get there? And yeah, it's just a good reminder of how much these platforms like Google have become commonplace in our life, and how they've gotten between us and the things that we need to do. And we don't even necessarily really think about it.
Right. It's like a part of your everyday. It's like how I'm not going to get out a map. I often remember this time I had to like print out a MapQuest page to go meet a friend, and I could never find her. And my dad and I got in a huge fight about it. But I was like, this is what the MapQuest said. But now it's just like part of our everyday life, and we don't think about it until it goes away. And then you realize like how much you rely on that kind of stuff. And that's true with the clip that you just played of, like, you know, email and using your credit card and your debit card. And it kind of, it bums me out because it felt so much like how I went about downloading music illegally for a while. And this is like a health procedure, like a medical health procedure. And we're treating it like I'm on LimeWire and in middle school.
LimeWire, wow. We threw it back. That still exists, by the way. Yeah, I'm thinking about how people get the cease and desist from FBI's for downloading movies today. And even maybe a knock on the door, they go to that level just for a movie. Don't get me wrong. You know, whatever, capitalism, it is what it is. But all the stuff that I'm thinking about as we're sitting here talking about it, I'm like, yeah, I use GPS just to go home. And half the time it's because I want to get traffic information. I need an ETA and I need to know which was the best route and all these things. And Google Map is my to go, obviously, for all of that. It's not just for the direction. And sometimes it's to tell me that something's closed or open half the time. And I can't imagine not using it at this point because I'm so reliant on that for my information because I don't listen to live broadcasts like radio when they used to do. I guess they still do traffic and weather and such, but I don't. I literally say, hey, Google, what's this? If something talks back to me, okay, it did. But, you know, just how quickly that becomes the solution. And then hearing her talking about these processes, it reminds me of trying to do like a spy movie. Yeah. Where we have to go get a burner phone with a burner credit card and make sure that we take out the chip just in case that gets followed. I'm like, the links that people are going to have to go to, and most of the people who are having to access this type of care do, as you said, do not know how to do this, probably can't afford to do some of these things, may not even have access because we know that vanilla card, I don't buy that because there's a $3 fee at the very least. That pisses me off.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. No, it's a totally legitimate thing to be angry about. And I think you know, I don't want to make it sound like I am on I am so much more digitally secure than you. Like I don't use these things. I have a smartphone. I could not get anywhere without Google Maps. I use these tools regularly. I'm not suggesting that people who are not actively doing something that is potentially criminalized or illegal should stop using Google Maps, should stop using Gmail, should do these things, right? That's not necessarily realistic in 2023. I don't live my life that way. But I do think it is worth stepping back and just questioning what we give up when we get these conveniences in our life. And just having an awareness of that, because I want to be able to find the quickest route home. I want to be able to avoid traffic. I want to know if there's a police officer with a scanner there or a toll or whatever, or a road closure. That is convenient. That is a convenient way to live modern life in 2023. But it's not just something that I'm being given without a cost. And so I think that we should be really aware and have a really good sense of what those costs are, because it can be easy to think that there is no cost. And there's no such thing as a free lunch. There is a cost. You know, my dad is someone who does not trust GPS. So he doesn't have, when he gets in the car to go on a trip, he's got those old school big road atlases under his seat still in 2023. God love him. And but it's as inconvenient as that is, he's gaining something. So it's really about all of us making a cost benefit analysis of what we are giving up versus what we are getting, and not thinking that we're just getting this cool new way to have a modern convenience in our life that's just coming at no cost for us. There is a cost, and we should be aware of it.
And that's the thing, is the conversation is, should there be a cost? Why can't we have access to these amazing things? Yes, the privacy thing, maybe. But even on top of that, the fact that there is a chance of being persecuted and prosecuted for a thing that shouldn't be even a law, to begin with. And having conversations like people who are going after people and who they're going after. And we know that these laws typically go after the marginalized people as well as those in the lower social economic status. And it's that really is the burden of it all, is that what this is doing is waging a war and going after and persecuting people who in themselves are already down and out, I guess is the best way to put it, or already put at the bottom end of the poll. Like they're not having the opportunities or the ability to even defend themselves. Some of the cases that have come forward as abortion cases have been miscarriages who have been taken out of context and say they try to get an abortion. And a lot of them are refugees or in the immigrant status. I've seen so many stories of that, and they have no way of defending themselves because they don't get legal help, typically the good legal help, we'll say it that way, or even the hearing. And when we talk about people who are being held for immigration violations, like we've seen so many conversations, well, not enough because it doesn't get publicized, where convictions and things are that of that nature are coming out from that or going after people who cannot get good representation. And again, these laws, even though it does affect everyone and we should all be talking about it, but we know that who are truly affected are those who can't represent themselves and advocate for themselves. And that's the whole conversation is what is happening, who is doing this, and why can't we be safe from this? Why can't we, like, this shouldn't be one of the cost benefits. It shouldn't be one or the other. It should be that we have the rights to do this and feel safe at the same time.
I mean, like you put it so well, privacy is a right. Digital privacy is a right, especially when it comes to things that are sensitive, like our health information, our health data, visiting places like shelters or clinics. We should have an expectation of privacy around those issues. If you are someone who is already burdened by being a marginalized person in society, if you are already burdened by, maybe not having stable housing or having difficulties in your life, on top of that, you shouldn't have to know what a Tor browser is just to make safe decisions for yourself because of the whims of a company like Google. But right now, that's the landscape that Google is creating, and they have the power and the ability to change that. They have said they are going to not do that, and yet they just aren't. And so I completely agree with you. I think that Google needs to decide if they are going to be in the business of creating a world where privacy is a right and people have the expectation of privacy or not. And if they're not going to, don't say otherwise. I think that's kind of one of the reasons why I get so angry about this is like they're able to enjoy this public perception of proactively trying to keep people a little bit safer while not doing that. So why to just say it if you weren't going to do it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And making all this money, I can only assume they just really make a lot of money off our data. So they're like, yeah.
I will talk all day. Let's just say your assumption is correct. Your assumption is very, very correct. And yeah, I think that we need to fundamentally change our understanding when it comes to the relationship between users, our data, and platforms. Like the fact that Google, it's so extractive, they take so much from us. They can lie and misrepresent what they take from us and how they take it, and they can make billions of dollars off of it. Something is wrong with that equation. We need to fundamentally rethink the relationship that users have with platforms.
Yes. And there has been some attempts recently to kind of change the situation.
That's right. So just last week, nearly a dozen Senate Democrats wrote to Google with questions about how it deletes users' location history when they have visited these sensitive locations like abortion clinics, expressing concerns that the company may not be consistently deleting the data as promised. These included Senators Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, and Mazie Hirono asking for answers from Google about the types of locations they consider to be sensitive and how long it takes for the company to automatically delete visit history. Again, Google said it was going to be, quote, soon. Accountable Tech found that it hadn't happened in 30 days after that visit. So, I think these senators are right to at least get some clarity about, well, what do you consider soon? And just a few days ago, Google was sued by an anonymous complainant claiming that Google unlawfully collects health data, including abortion searches, on third-party websites that use Google Tech. Jane Doe, who is the complainant, their legal representation is looking to get the case certified as a class action suit and claims that her private information was intercepted by Google when she used the scheduling pages on Planned Parenthood's website in 2018 to search for an abortion provider. So I think it's interesting that she is trying to pursue this as a class action litigation, because I do think there is a class of people, like a large group of people who are facing harm because of Google. It is not individuals. It is all of us. We are a collective harmed group. And so I really am interested in the fact that this isn't just one person suing Google. She is trying to do it as a class action lawsuit because it is representative, in my opinion, of a collective harm.
That's interesting because we know that there's some class action suits happening with Facebook, and it's a pretty big deal because there's a couple with billions of dollars in hand. We know that the EU has gone after a couple of companies as well. I believe, is it Twitter? For billions of dollars in fines, possibly. But that's what's going to change anything. We know that it's not actually about humanity. It's about the money. And if it's going to cost them money, then they're more likely to do something as long as they don't have to pay out whatever it may be. And just $10, a few pennies to millions of people is a lot of money. So that's actually a smart way to go, I think.
Yeah, I should just do a quick plug. If you are a U.S. resident who used Facebook between May 24th, 2007 and December 22nd, 2022, you can file a monetary claim as long as you do so before August 25th, 2023. And so it is, for a company like Facebook, it probably won't be more than like a slap on the wrist for them. It probably won't be something that they really feel. But if you are in the group that I just mentioned, I absolutely am in that group, and I'm filing for my claim. I think that anybody listening who was in that group should file for their claim because that is the only way that these companies have, that's the only kind of, it makes me sad to say, but we don't have a lot of recourse for companies like Meta and Google. There's not much that the average user can do that will actually make them feel this. And one way that we have is hitting them in their pocketbook. And so, yeah, get your settlement, even if it's $10, get your $10 and buy yourself a coffee, whatever.
Knowing that it's building up. We're just building up the cost. And that's the thing is we see in so many things. We've talked about civil suits when it comes to rape cases and sexual assault cases and why they're important, even though so many people are like, oh, you're just trying to go after the money. No, this is a big deal because we know this is a form of punishment that is more likely to happen rather than the guilty, not guilty judicial level of punishment. We know this. So having things like this is really important because it does make a stand, whether it's big or small. Same thing with the Dominion lawsuit that happened with Fox. It was a big deal. People were mad that they settled, but that cost really did hit them in the end. And these types of things is this conversation, and it's going to be a precedent of what can be filed later on because obviously things are building up. As long as Google holds out and not actually deleting, they're going to get more cases. If this goes forward and wins, they're going to get more piled on. And that's a good thing. A sad thing that it has to get to that point, but it is a good thing. So it's something that definitely we should watch.
Definitely. And, one question that I have is how is it legal for Google to say one thing about their privacy policies and do another? I'm no lawyer. I don't know how it is legal, though. I fully do not understand how Google can mislead the public about data privacy practices, how that is legal under the Federal Trade Commission. I'm no expert, don't understand it. Maybe it's not legal, but whether or not it's illegal, it is certainly unethical. It is unethical to say one thing and do another, and it is certainly unsafe. And the bottom line is that people deserve privacy, and it shouldn't be up to the whims of the people who run Google to decide whether or not we get it or how we get it. We really need to rethink this schema where the people tech leaders at Google, they are the ones who decide whether or not we get privacy. People deserve privacy, especially when it comes to their health information. Full stop, period, end of sentence.
Right. And I wonder how much the government has done because they've really taken away a lot of any kind of power against these companies because we've seen the amount of updated agreements in order to use anything. I think I got it for TikTok. TikTok, we know they're under fire. We had that episode, but they had a new agreement. I know Samsung continues to do it every few months, and the amount of privacy is going away. It's interesting how quickly they're changing it, and there's nothing you can do because you're already sucked in to that system, and that's what Google is doing. And because of the way that the government has allowed for these companies to be territorial and to continue to gather that data. I'm not a conspiracist, but I think there's a big conspiracy behind this and about how much control they want to have over the individual citizens when that's concerning.
Yeah, and I think I'm with you. You don't sound like a conspiracy theorist to me at all. And I think the first thing that we can do is really understand what's being asked of us. And it's not easy because they don't make it easy. When you get that 25-page thing that you have to scroll down just to log onto your phone, come on, be real. Like, who is reading that? Like, I don't fault anybody for being like, oh, I'll just hit agree. But it shouldn't be that way. You shouldn't have to be a trained lawyer or trained in understanding tech speak and have to parse a 30-page privacy agreement that you have to click through just to get to your email just to exist safely online with privacy and dignity. Like people deserve that. We have accepted and tolerated and created a system that is so burdenous to the average citizen, and it should not be that way.
Right. And there is so much going on right now in terms of technology and tumultuous times in technology and understanding those kinds of things. And you, Bridget, are amazing at explaining those kinds of things. So we always love having you here. But you're also like breaking down these issues all not without us on your own show.
Thank you for that little introduction. So
yes.
Yeah, I don't know if other folks feel it, but I think in this particular moment in time, we always talk about this sort of like the future of tech and what's next. It feels like we are in that moment today, right? When it comes to platforms, with the state of Twitter and like what new platforms are going to pop up and where are we all going to spend our time digitally. When it comes to conversations about the rise of AI, and when it comes to the increasing threat of expanding tech surveillance, like we talked about today, it feels like a very weird time for technology and the internet and where we're going in the future. And it feels like all of that future conversation is actually here today. And so we have a new season on There Are No Girls on the Internet, exploring how increasingly it feels like this future of technology is happening now, precisely because it is so important that the voices of people who are traditionally left out of these conversations, women, people of color, queer folks, disabled folks, working folks, are not left out of those conversations. And so if you want to parse what it all means, where we've been and where we're going, and what we need to know to make sure that our voices are centered in these conversations, please check out the new season of my pod, There Are No Girls on the Internet, where we are doing just that.
Yeah, definitely, listeners, go check it out. It does feel like we're in Moore's curve? It feels like we're in the real upward part of that.
Yeah.
It's kind of scary.
Good, what is it? Is it geometry? What is curves and stuff? Good math reference, Anney.
Thank you.
Way to math, Anney.
Way to math.
That might not even be the correct term, but I think it is. And if it's not, then that's really funny. So whatever. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
The curve. Yeah. So we love having you. We've missed you. And we always take up so much of your time. So I appreciate it. We could just talk to you forever about all kinds of things.
Oh my God. The pleasure is so mine. This is I could talk to you guys all day, because it's just so nice to connect on these issues. And it's nice to be able to talk to them with you two.
Yes, it really is. Well, where can the good listeners find you?
Well, as I said, you can check out my podcast, There Are No Girls on the Internet, wherever you podcast. We are there. You can follow me. I'm still on Twitter, kind of, at Bridget Marie. You can follow me on TikTok at Bridget Makes Pods. You can follow me on Instagram at Bridget Marie in DC. And I would love to have you on any of those platforms.
Yes, and also beef.
Oh, yeah, beef. Don't sleep on beef. It's a little bit different than my usual content, because it's just so much of my content is heavier and based around the internet and here's what you need to know. If you're trying to have a good time and just nerd out on some historical rivalries, who's not, definitely check out Beef. Super fun.
See what's going on in the advice column world.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, thank you so much again for being here. Listeners, if you'd like to contact us, you can. Our email is stephaniamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at Momstuff Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You, also on YouTube. We do have a book coming out. You can pre-order it at stuffyoushouldreadbooks.com. Thank you, as always, to our super producer, Christina, our executive producer, Maya, and our contributor, Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.